of coffee, sit back and listen to Change Your Attitude, Change Your Life. Change Your Attitude, Change Your Life features stories to inspire and motivate you. Live your best life now. Listen, learn, think, and decide. Change your attitude, change your life. Visit cyacyl.com.
Welcome to Change Your Attitude, Change Your Life. I'm Joan Herman. Thanks for tuning in. Today's show is very special to me because I'm humbled to have this person brought to me to help her in some small way to get her story out. And it's a miraculous story. Anita Moorjani fought cancer for almost 4 years. Her body became overwhelmed by the malignant cells and it began shutting down. As her organs failed, Anita slipped into a coma and entered a near-death experience. Upon regaining consciousness, Anita's condition improved so rapidly that she could be released from the hospital within weeks without a trace of cancer in her body. Doctors from around the world who have taken an interest in her miraculous recovery have independently reviewed her medical case, including medical records and x-ray scans that show her cancer-ridden diagnosis just before her near-death experience, as well as all of her post-experience records that indicate she is cancer-free. Anita is the author of the new book, Dying to Be Me, My Journey from Cancer to Near Death to True Healing. She frequently speaks at conferences and events around the world, and Anita appears on Dr. Wayne Dyer's Wishes Fulfilled PBS special. Anita currently resides in Hong Kong. Anita, thank you so much for joining us today. I'm so happy that you are here.
Thank you for inviting me. It's such a pleasure to be here.
Anita, the near-death experience changed everything for you, and I'm really looking forward to having the opportunity to share what I believe was a miracle. So as I said, I'm humbled that in some way, if I can help get your story out there, to me it is such an honor. So again, thank you for being here.
Oh, wow. Thank you.
Anita, April 26, 2002. That was the day that you were thrust into a life-changing journey. And I want to start there, and then we're going to go back into your life up until that day. But what happened to you on April 26, 2002?
On that day, I got the results of a biopsy that I had taken a couple of days prior to that, and it was confirmed that I had lymphoma. And I had found a lump on my collarbone just a couple of days prior, and I'd gone into the doctor, and the doctor seemed to look alarmed and conducted a biopsy. And what scared me was that he actually phoned me the following day and said for me to come in, and he said, do you have anybody with you? And I said, my husband is there, and he said that I'd like you both to come in together. So as soon as he said that, I knew. And so when we went in to the doctor's clinic, and he told me that I had lymphoma, and it was a Friday, and he said that we've got to talk about the options, and that he was going to send me for some scans so that they can stage what level it's at. But my world just crumbled at that point. I was in so much fear at hearing the word cancer.
And I'd like to backtrack for a moment if we can, because we talk so often on this show, Change Your Attitude, Change Your Life, about attitude and about the things that we internalize and how it has a direct impact on our health. And I know that this is something that you've come to believe because of what you've experienced. So tell us a little bit about your upbringing and the journey of your life to that point of April 26, 2002.
My parents are traditional Hindus. I was brought up as a Hindu, but I lived in a multicultural society. I grew up in Hong Kong, and I went to a British school, but the local people in Hong Kong are Chinese. The kids in my school were British, and so I was exposed. I was thrust into all these different cultures, and I spoke 3 languages simultaneously. I spoke our traditional Indian language at home and Chinese outside in the streets, and I learned to speak English at school. And what I found was that there was a lot of internal conflict within me because I was a people pleaser, and I was always very afraid to get things wrong. And in my culture, there's a lot of gender disparity. For example, males are favored over females, and females are expected to be subservient. And so as I was growing up into my teen years, especially my late teen years, my parents were hoping to arrange a marriage for me. But because I had a British education, and I knew that, basically my education was a little bit different from the education my parents had. So we didn't just have a generational gap, we had a culture gap. And so I was defiant, and I would fight back. But they would try to instill in me that this is your culture. You've got to uphold your culture. And so I lived in a lot of fear of constantly being different. I felt I didn't fit in at school. I felt I didn't fit in at home. I felt like a complete misfit, and I always felt like nobody understood me.
And Anita, wasn't some of that, I had read that, you attended Catholic school, but yet you had a different upbringing, and there were so many variables in your life that would lead you to feel insecure and that you didn't fit in. Is that a correct assessment?
That's a correct assessment, because originally my parents sent me to a Catholic school because they felt that would be good for me, because Catholic schools are quite strict. And I mean, we were living in Hong Kong, so they couldn't send me to a Hindu school because that didn't exist. But what happened is that I was under a lot of pressure by the nuns and my peers to get baptized and to go to church. And so I felt I didn't fit in, because I would tell my parents that I want to be baptized. I need to go to church, because all my friends are saying that only if we accept Jesus Christ will we go to heaven. And my parents said that, no, but you're a Hindu. You don't have to worry about that. Our beliefs are different. You come to learn about the Bhagavad Gita and about reincarnation. And I said, no, but in school they said that that's all wrong. And so that created a lot of fear within me as well, because I started to get scared about what's going to happen when I die, and am I not going to get to heaven? And so my parents had to pull me out of that school, and then they put me into another school, which was a little bit more multicultural, and there was less focus on religion. But still, I was still like the only Indian kid amongst a whole bunch of British kids. So I still didn't fit in, because my parents, their values were very different, and they were quite strict about my hours and about going out in the evenings, like, say, for example, to youth dances and things. I wasn't allowed to go out if there were boys involved. So I felt left out even there. And so it was, I spent my entire life feeling that I just didn't belong anywhere.
Anita, what do you think those internal beliefs did to you on a physical level?
It always made me feel flawed. It always made me feel like I'm not good enough, and that I had to try harder to be better, or I had to work on myself, or that I couldn't accept myself the way I am. There was something wrong with me.
And when you internalized those feelings, do you think that had a direct impact on what happened to you later on?
Yeah, definitely. It definitely did. At no point in my life did anybody ever tell me that you're perfect. It's okay to be different. It's who you are. Embrace yourself. Nobody in my entire life has ever told me that, but I don't think anybody really says that to anybody.
Anita, just prior to your diagnosis, you lost 2 loved ones to cancer. What impact did that have on you?
That had a huge impact. My best friend, she was my closest friend. She was like a sister to me. She got diagnosed in 2001, and I watched her body deteriorate. She had a very aggressive form of cancer that attacked her very quickly, and she was getting the absolute best medical care that money can buy. And she went to the best cancer institutes in Hong Kong, which are affiliated with the best U.S. cancer institutes. She was getting the best drugs, and it had zero effect. In fact, the more that she was being treated, the faster that her health was declining. And so that instilled a lot of fear in me. And within weeks after she was diagnosed, my husband's brother-in-law was diagnosed with cancer. And he actually lived in New York, and the same thing was happening with him. He went to the best cancer institutes, but he declined rapidly as well. So I started to develop a fear for cancer, because what I had done was I started to read up a lot about cancer because I wanted to support my friend. And so I started to read more about natural treatments and natural therapies and what causes cancer and what prevents cancer. But the more I would read, the more I felt that everything causes cancer, that there's carcinogenic chemicals in our food, in pesticides, in the pollution in the air we breathe. And so I started to get really fearful about getting cancer as I watched these two people declining, and then the more I was reading, all it did was fed my own fear about cancer.
And then your worst nightmare became a reality.
Yes.
Anita, we're going to take a break at this point. This is Change Your Attitude, Change Your Life. I'm Joan Herman. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Change Your Attitude, Change Your Life now has a free monthly digital magazine that can be read online or emailed to your inbox. Each month, nationally recognized leaders in their field provide the information that you need to inspire and motivate you. We believe in a holistic approach to life, incorporating mind, body, and spirit. As philosopher Francis Bacon said, knowledge is power. Use the wisdom provided in the publication and apply it to your everyday life. Visit cyacyl.com for more information or to begin your free subscription. That's cyacyl.com. Welcome back to Change Your Attitude, Change Your Life. I'm Joan Herman. Our guest today is Anita Moorjani, author of the new book, Dying to Be Me, My Journey from Cancer to Near Death to True Healing. Anita's here today to talk about her near-death experience and her healing from a terminal diagnosis. Anita, before break, we were talking about your greatest fear, the fear of becoming a cancer patient. And from that fear, you experienced your worst nightmare. On April 26, 2002, you heard those words, "You have cancer."
Yep.
What was the stage of your cancer? You had told us it was a lymphoma. What was the stage and what was the prognosis at that point?
At that point, the prognosis wasn't that bad, but I was staged at 2A. So after the biopsy, they sent me to have the scans, and the scans showed I was staged at 2A. And would you like me to explain a little bit about what that means?
Sure.
Cancer is staged from 1 to 4, so 1 being the lowest and 4 being terminal. And the A and B is the symptoms. A means you're not experiencing any other physical symptoms or any discomfort from it. And B means you're actually experiencing symptoms like, difficulty breathing or fever and so on. So I was staged at 2A, which means stage 1 would be if it was just local in that lymph node which they biopsied. But stage 2 means it had spread about just to 1 or 2 lymph nodes. It was basically in the upper left-hand quadrant of my body, from my left collarbone and down to under my left arm. So it had spread just a little bit. So it was 2A because I had no other symptoms. No one would know I had cancer to look at me, and I felt fine physically.
What was the recommended treatment for you at that time?
At that point, the doctor said my only option was chemotherapy and possibly a bit of radiation.
Did you take part in that type of treatment, or did you look for an alternative?
I looked for an alternative because, to me, the minute he said chemotherapy, I said, I'm watching 2 people whose health is declining with the best chemotherapy that money can buy. I don't want any of that. And so I didn't believe that chemotherapy could cure me. But I already felt in my head that with a cancer diagnosis that I was going to die. This was a death sentence because my friend had been completely fine, or she looked physically fine, until she got the diagnosis and started going for treatment. And that's when I saw her deteriorate. And so I refused the treatment at first.
So you had already decided at this point that you were handed a death sentence?
Yep.
So what ended up happening? Were you successful for any time period with your treatment?
I was, actually. I started to experiment with alternatives, and I even went to India and I worked under like a yogi master, and I followed Ayurvedic medicines, and I actually started to feel and look better. And the yoga master actually said to me that you don't have cancer. There's no such thing as cancer. Everything is just an imbalance in your body. And so I started to feel good emotionally and mentally, and the fear started to lift.
And then what happened? I think you went back home then, and what happened to you?
I went back home, and actually what happened is that I felt a lot better, but then a lot of people started asking me what I was doing, and I told them what I was doing, and people were really skeptical. But the thing that really set me back was my best friend then died of cancer. And as soon as she died, I was just totally filled with this huge fear. It was just awful. And everybody was saying to me that you can't leave this alone and not do anything about it. Because to other people, the fact that I was doing alternative, to them it meant I wasn't doing anything about my cancer. People tend to think in terms of you go to a hospital and you get chemotherapy and radiation, and that means you're treating it. But anything else you do, it means you're not doing anything about the cancer.
So you started to internalize other people's beliefs.
Yes. So I started to internalize, and then people were saying, look what happened to your friend. You don't want that to happen to you, so you better get some treatment. But I was saying, this happened to her even with the treatment.
Anita, what was the progression of your disease from that point on?
So it started to spread through my body, and I noticed that it started to spread with a vengeance. And looking back on it now, in hindsight, I can see that it was when my fear really started to come back after coming back from India, that it started to spread faster. And then I started to develop what they call the B symptoms, which is the night sweats, the low-grade fever, the constant fever, fluid in my lungs, so I had difficulty breathing. And I was getting blood transfusions, and I started to get weaker and weaker, and I was losing weight. And I was going into hospital all the time for blood transfusions and also for the doctor to remove fluid from my lungs.
And how long did this go on?
This, in total, from the day I was diagnosed to the day I had the near-death experience, it was 3 years and 10 months.
And then what happened on February 2nd, 2006?
Okay, that was an interesting day. And in fact, I'll rewind just a little bit. In December, 2 months prior to that, I had a full-body scan, and the doctor told my husband that I only had 3 months to live at best. He said the tumors had spread all over my body. And at that point, I was already in a wheelchair. My muscles had wasted, and I couldn't walk for long periods of time. And I weighed probably 85 pounds, and I had open skin lesions. I was on a portable oxygen tank, and I had a full-time nurse caring for me. So when the doctor said I had only 3 months, he didn't tell me. He just told my husband, and thankfully my husband didn't tell me. But 6 weeks later, on February 2nd, 2006, in the morning, I didn't wake up. The night before, the nurse had injected me with morphine so I could go to sleep, and then she went home. And I was in a lot of pain, and I had a lot of trouble breathing because every time I lied flat, I would choke on my own fluid because my lungs were filled with fluid. So in the morning of February 2nd, I didn't wake up. My eyes were closed, and apparently my body was really swollen, and it had bloated like a balloon. And when my husband saw it, it really freaked him out. It completely freaked him out. The first thing he did was call our doctor, and the doctor told him to rush me to the hospital right away. And so my husband rushed me to the hospital, and it was a different hospital from the one I'd been going to. He told my husband to rush me to one of the top cancer hospitals in Hong Kong. And that hospital would have intimidated me any time before. And so that was the first time I was going into that hospital.
And Anita, we are out of time for this show. Anita is going to come back next week to pick up the story at February 2nd, 2006, the day she died and the day she had a near-death experience. Anita's book, if you'd like to read it in the meantime, is Dying to Be Me, My Journey from Cancer to Near Death to True Healing. And you can get more information about Anita at her website, which is anitamoorjani.com. That's M-O-O-R-J-A-N-I, anitamoorjani.com. And as always, you can get more information about Anita at our website, which is cyacyl.com. That stands for Change Your Attitude, Change Your Life. While on our site, listen to past shows as podcasts, read our digital magazine, sign up for our mailing list, and now take part in the CYA-CYL Book Club. Anita, your story, it is a miraculous story, and as I said in the beginning, I'm very honored and humbled to be able to help you get your message to the masses.
Wow, thank you. I'm honored to be here.
This is Change Your Attitude, Change Your Life. I'm Joan Herman. Thanks for tuning in.